Hello, Kun Gayatri. Thanks for joining Eye on the Biz. Um, Recently, we cover a seminar on the topic of online freedom and national security at Chulalongkorn University. So we already have covered some of the domestic um, aspect of the issue. And you, as the Executive Director of CEPA, which is Southeast Asia Press Alliance, maybe you can give us a wider regional aspect of the issue. So what is the issue now in ASEAN countries?
So firstly, Kun Sinfa, thank you very much for the opportunity. This is actually a very interesting topic, or very current, because at CEPA we monitor how users use the online space and how states actually respond to what we can say as critical critical information or responses. And one of the most obvious trends, I would say, is that in some of the responses, the national security argument becomes the key argument in order to either control or to actually curb such expressions. So everywhere from Vietnam to Malaysia, Singapore, and also Indonesia, which, like Thailand, is said to be more democratic, the states have used the argument that we need to protect national security, and therefore it justifies online controls and regulation. So it can be in the interest of religious sort of religious rights expressions. It can also be the state sovereignty. It can be the governments, for example in Malaysia. And also in Malaysia, we have to protect the monarchy, the royal institution. So all these are lumped together in the interest of national security, and many times cited in order to control the internet space. So I would say it's a very, very obvious trend, and often it's very difficult to argue against national security, because it's always the privy of the states to define what it is. And so it's always a losing battle when it comes to challenging the state's actions.
Could you give us some of the more concrete pictures, maybe from your own home country, Malaysia, how some other government in the region have been using national security as an excuse to restrict online freedom?
I will cite two examples, one in Vietnam, which I would say is on the very serious side, and another one from Malaysia, where I would say it's a trivial case and yet it falls under national security. So in the case of Vietnam, issues of sovereignty that are often not covered by the mainstream media become the topic for bloggers. This is in relationship to China, for example, the issue of South China Sea, the contestation for the islands. And so there are, in the last few years, people have been voicing their concerns, which are in fact to protect the sovereign state against China. And we do know the relationship between Vietnam and China, that is very close. So there's pressure from the Chinese government to clamp down on some of the expressions. And so some of the bloggers have been arrested and charged under the Penal Code, Article 77. There's also, if I'm not mistaken, 258, on spreading propaganda against the state and also against the interests of the country, the sovereignty. And these are, what we say, these are very reasonable arguments or criticisms from the bloggers to say, why are we doing this? Why are we allowing, for example, the land to be taken over, the economy to be determined by another foreign government? So it's things that you would see in the media, you should be seeing in the media, but it's not there. And so these bloggers are charged under those provisions which accuse them of spreading propaganda against the state, against the party. Very, very serious punishments that come with that. So there are many bloggers languishing in jail for that. So I think with Vietnam, the tendency to accuse the bloggers as being anti-state, anti-party is something so serious. Even youths, young people in the university who are voicing their concerns have also been arrested and are jailed. Now on the other hand, in Malaysia, while of course there's a lot of issue about ethnic relations and everything, sometimes it's so trivial, like in the recent fasting month for the Muslims. There are two bloggers who are identified as sex bloggers because they like to talk about sex and education and whatever in their blogs in Malaysia. So they posted a picture wishing the Muslim readers happy fasting, breaking of fast, and it looked as though they were eating pork. Okay, and you know that pork is also considered as haram among the Muslims. And so there were complaints. I'm not even sure who the complaints came from. And so they were arrested under the Sedition Act. Now, Sedition Act is very clearly about tendency to incite hatred. You don't even have to prove intent as long as a tendency. And so they've been charged under, they've been arrested under three, one, the most severe being the sedition. So this is on the other end. So it becomes a national security issue because you are causing this hatred among people, So these are, I would say, like some of the most recent examples.
How do you see, as you monitor the freedom of expression in the region, how you see that the issue of online freedom and national security will be involved in our region?
I think the battle is actually on the online space because more or less when it comes to other forms of media, I think the states have pretty much had a grip. They know how to control the older forms of media, advertisements being one, other regulations. In some countries, the printing regulations still exist. So in a way, they think they've got a grip of the situation. But with the online, it's almost anarchic, it's almost chaotic, it's the attacks are coming from so many directions, they feel like we are not in control. So, some people say, well, this is the battleground now for online. And I think that despite the technology being a very new technology, the states are employing some of the older laws because with the new laws, you can't really control so much. And so they're putting in a lot of the older laws, libel, sedition, security, blasphemy even, into controlling the infrastructure, the space. So it's actually quite contradictory, but I think this is what they have at hand now. So I think in the future we would see the states doing a lot of investment in order to actually control the online space. And I think the recent disclosures from the US with surveillance, I think it's only the tip of the iceberg. And I think we need to keep an eye on how much states in this region are going down that path from old forms of surveillance to new forms of surveillance.
In Thailand here we have what we know as Computer Crime Act, which is the main tool to restrict freedom of expression for the online media. Can you tell us what are the other similar tools that they have in other countries in the region?
Sure. So in Malaysia, they do have the Communications and Multimedia Act from 1998. On the one hand, it looks very business oriented, very much in terms of spectrum, to deal with telecommunications and all that. But they have quite a lot of provisions on content regulation, and which can be deciphered as also to regulate the online space expression. In Burma, some of these laws still exist. They have Electronic Transactions Act, which could also get you into trouble for communications using online spaces. Indonesia also has some content regulation in the electronics and law. Philippines recently passed a Cybercrime Prevention Act, which includes a provision on libel, which is very unusual, really. And in Malaysia, they also amended the Evidence Act of 1950 to include intermediary liability. So even if you did not post something, but it was done in your premises, then if they cannot locate the person who posted it, you as the owner of the premise, in fact, can become liable for investigations. So they included in another law, the Evidence Act. Cambodia is discussing also a cybercrime law. We are not very sure about what is in there, but I think we can all safely speculate that content regulation will become a major part in all of these laws.
Maybe this will be my last question. So having said all of that, would you be able to say among the ASEAN country, the 10 ASEAN country, which country would you say that's more restrictive in terms of online freedom than the others?
Actually, it's not that difficult because it's a scale that is not a balanced scale, and I will include Timor-Leste as well in the group just because they are a country that we also monitor. So the ones where maybe it's freer at the moment would be Philippines, would be Timor-Leste. Maybe because their infrastructure is not that strong yet, but there's very little in terms of the kind of state response, and so it's still relatively free in that sense. And despite talking about the cybercrime prevention, the general environment in the Philippines is very positive for the online, even in terms of how they discuss keeping the space, promoting regulation that's enabling rather than controlling. Now, a lot of the other countries actually just fall on the other side, and I think that is not because we want to make one look worse than the other, but because from Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Malaysia, Singapore, despite being so developed, and Thailand, the potential for abuse is just so high. I think that is really the problem, and all states have demonstrated that they are not reluctant to use it against critics. The potential for abuse is high because the wordings are, in most of these laws, are quite broad. They have very little legal limitations in that sense defined, and the fact that they have tended to use it for government critiques more than cybercrime, for the purposes of cybercrime. I think based on these three reasons, the other 7 countries really will go on the other side of the scale.
Yeah. That's very interesting, and is Kun Kaya have give us some background information that we can follow the trend in the region. Today, I would like to thank Kun Gayatri a lot for joining our programs, and I truly believe that we will have her back with us again in the near future. Thank you very much.